Hello there, and welcome to Wild Card Decks, a channel where I try to showcase some cards and decks that are perhaps outside of a meta or being slept on or lesser used. So today we're looking at Asajj Red, and most of the lists that I've seen for Asajj have focused on the Underworld kind of set of cards and synergies in that sense. This is very much, for me anyway, the successor to the Kylo Ren aggro yellow deck that I was playing in set 2. And yeah, this version does have changes from what I played the other day, as I realised I needed more one-cost events for Asajj's deployment turn, but there's definitely room for some tweaking and balancing. So this is, again, can be viewed as a bit of a template because there's a lot of good events that work really well with Asajj, cheap events as well. So as I say, this is a very much an aggro deck. It mainly uses separatist units. It is vulnerable to hand disruption, but with the aggressive stance that we're taking, hopefully your opponent is more focusing on trying to defend the board rather than attacking your hand. So in terms of the numbers, this might be the lowest number of units I've put into a deck thus far because we've got so many events. Got a few upgrades as well. In terms of resource costs, as you can see, all very cheap generally. I will make a deck at one point, I promise, that has more higher cost cards, but at the moment we're still on the cheap side of things. And then in terms of rarity, there is one legendary in here, but there is definitely some others that you can put in instead if you do not have that card. And yeah, otherwise it's very achievable to put together. Just a few cards from the set 3 starter deck. So Asajj herself, she is very much quite, yeah, an oppressive leader. Her front side action is not particularly exciting, and I've often forgotten to use it, to be honest. But basically, if you've used an event in the phase, then you can use her action to attack with a unit. It gets +1. So far, so simple. When she deploys, however, and she is a very early deploy leader on 4, which adds to her aggressive and oppressive nature. She's a 3/4, so okay stats. But most importantly, on attack, if you played an event this phase, this unit gets +1, so similar to her frontside action, but she can deal combat damage before the defender, so it's basically the same as a shoot first event. So she can take out, if her attack would kill the enemy unit, the unit dies, she takes no damage back, which is just insane. Because if you combine this with Surprise Strike, for example, that gives her the +1 plus the +3 from Surprise Strike, which gives her 7 attack. She can take out most leaders by herself and take no damage, which is nuts. I go with Tarkin Town, which feels like it has exploded in popularity this set, and that is probably because of the elite P-38 Starfighter, which we will get onto. But again, this helps with the aggressive and oppressive nature of this deck. You typically will be Tarkin Towning very early to have superior board presence, but if you do get into a spot where you're using Tarkin Town later, then it can be much more useful. Possibly one of the strongest things you can do with this deck is deploying Asajj using Force Throw, so then you do some damage to an enemy unit, if not killing it outright. You can then take out a unit with her attack, and then if there is a damaged unit left over, Tarkin Town it away. You've possibly killed 2 or 3 different units in one phase, giving you a very clear advantage to just keep attacking their base and see if they can try and recover. So onto the ground units, and most of these are separatist apart from Kylo Ren, who we'll get onto. So Lux Bonteri is unique, 3/2, so decent attack stats. But when an opponent plays a card, if that opponent played less than the card's cost to play it, ready or exhaust a unit. So good defensive or offensive capabilities. And it doesn't say ready or exhaust another unit, so you could ready himself back up. He's just a good separatist because we have some separatist synergies in here. But he helps to mitigate the danger of things like exploit, Now there are two of them. Triple Dark Raid, or all those kind of things. He helps to provide a small advantage to yourself as well. So he's just a solid card. Series Officer, so 2-1, not stats to write home about, but when defeated, deal 2 damage to a base. So you're pretty much guaranteed to be able to do 2 damage to a base, if not more, and also damage their units, which you might then want to Tarkin Town away. So just overall, really good for an aggressive deck, and it is Separatist as well. Separatist Commando, 2 cost, 2/3, so decent stats in and of itself, but it has Raid 2 if you control another Separatist unit, and that is one of the reasons why we want Separatist units as the majority in this deck. So we do have Keep Fighting as well, which means that with this unit alone, in one phase it can attack for 8 if you've got the Raid 2 activated. So overall, very, very good card to have. You probably, in an ideal world, would play this first phase and then play another Separatist immediately after in the second phase, and then be able to attack with this for 4. Super Battle Droid, so it's just a basic 4/3 unit, so decent stats, just for 2 of them, but again it's Separatist to help with Separatist synergies, that's the main reason it's in here. Now, Asajj Ventress as a unit, I wasn't very big on this card originally, but after using it within this deck, it's actually extremely good. So it costs 4 normally, but it has Exploit 2. So Exploit, the number is the number of units you can exploit as a maximum, and for each one that you do, it costs 2 less. So she can actually cost 0, and we have Droid Deployment in here primarily for that purpose, because then you can get her down for 2 or for 0 cost relatively easily and reliably. Now, 2/4 stats aren't very exciting for a 4 cost, but her real power is on attack. If you're attacked with another Separatist unit this phase, this unit gets +3 for this phase, so she can actually hit for 5 if you get your sequencing right. Combine this with Keep Fighting, and you have to keep sequencing in mind, she can hit for 7 in a phase, so you attack with her first, she hits for 2, attack with another Separatist unit, then use Keep Fighting on her, then she gets the +3 attack for the phase. Now, because it's for the phase, that's what makes it important to think of the sequencing. If it was just for this attack, then it wouldn't be as significant in terms of Keep Fighting sequencing. And it's also something to bear in mind if you're against a deck that has Fell the Dragon, then because it's for the phase and not just for the attack, it will put her within range of that. She's also a Force unit, which is significant because we've got Fallen Lightsaber and Force Throw, which we'll get onto later. As the kind of hammer to really try to push home the game if needed, we've got 1 Kylo Ren. He is the legendary of the deck. There's definitely some other units you can put in instead if you do not have him, which I'll get onto towards the end. But he is a 6/7, but in reality, because of his on-attack trigger, he is an 8/7. Because we've got Lux Monteri. You could give Lux +2/+0 for this phase and give him an experience because he's non-villainy. But really, you're going to be looking for the guaranteed play of attacking with Kylo for 8, because you do not have to give the on-attack effect to another unit. So yeah, a 6 unit who can hit for 8 is just nuts. And the fact that he's Force as well means that Force Throw will get the full effect if he is deployed. The other day, I actually forced through Kylo himself into an Obi-Wan Sentinel, which killed him instantly, and there were no other units out, so there was no experience benefit from his defeated trigger. So that is another option, and he is the highest cost card we've got in the deck, and we only got 1 of him. Onto the space units, and I've got 1 TIE Silencer. There is probably a case to have more if you have more. I only have a 1 that I own, so I've only got 1 in the list. But the main reason for that is because if you manage to Force Throw and you want to Force Throw yourself, then you can still play this card from your discard pile. Because if it's discarded from your hand or deck this phase, play it from your discard pile. You don't have to pay its cost, but it just helps defend your own hand whilst making sure you get, if if you know you only need 2 damage, then it's a safe bet. But 3-2, decent attack stats for a space unit at this phase. Vanguard Droid Bomber, so another Separatist synergy unit. 2-2, so not amazing stats, but when played, if you control another Separatist unit, which you are quite likely to, deal 2 damage to an enemy base. So it's a bit like a mini Ruthless Raider, in that you are pretty much guaranteed to get at least 2 damage onto your opponent's base just by playing it. So yeah, just helps with, especially combined with the series officer, where you've got 3 of these, that's potentially 6 damage overall just by playing it. Another 6 damage just by playing this card. It's 12 damage overall without really having to do anything. So really, really good. Confederate Tri-Fighter, I've only got 2 of these, but this will very much depend on what you're up against. So if you're going to sideboard, then have another one in there. But bases can't be healed. We've got no healing power in our deck, so it doesn't really matter for us, but makes it very difficult for your opponent if they're running a lot of restore, for example. It's got 3/3 stats as well, which is pretty good for such a useful ability. And then we've got Elite P-38 Starfighter, which is just a ridiculously good card, even though it's only a common. When played, you deal 1 damage to a unit, so this combines extremely well with Tarkin Town, because if you play this on phase 2, damage a unit, then you can basically Tarkin Town it away straight away if you want to, and you do want to generally Tarkin Town aggressively with this deck. And also when defeated, you can deal 1 damage to a unit. It also, I would say Village Protectors is a bit of a stumbling block with this deck potentially, so it can get rid of the shield from them as well. Lurking TIE Phantom, only got 2 of those. Again, depending on what you're going up against, you could make a case for having 3 instead and make an adjustment on the others. But it's immune to all kind of effects. It is vulnerable to perilous position and make an opening. That is going to be one of the most common ways of defeating it without attacking it directly. But it hits for 2, but it actually hits for 4 because of Ray 2. So again, this is another good target for keep fighting. So similar to the Separatist Commando, you can hit for 8 in a phase with this unit alone. Now onto the events, and we do have a significant number because that is Asajj's whole deal. Now originally I didn't have many 1-cost events, and I realised that doesn't work very well when you're trying to deploy Asajj, because ideally you want to put the Fallen Lightsaber on a Asajj so that she is out of range of the things like open fire and takedown and force choke. But then you're not going to be able to play anything else because I didn't have anywhere near enough 1-cost events. So Daring Raid, 2 damage to a unit or base, 1 cost. So yeah, hit a base, or if you want to hit a unit and then Tarkin Town it away, that's also a very good option. Or ping a shield off a Sentinel that you need to get rid of. Force Throw, so choose a player, you can choose yourself, as I said a bit earlier. That player discards a card from their hand. If you control a force unit, so we've got both the Asajj leader and Asajj unit, and potentially Kylo, although you're less likely to see him in the game. Deal that damage to a unit equal to the cost of a discarded card. So it attacks your opponent's hand. Potentially that's the most common use you'll make of this card, and does damage to a unit if you have a force unit out. And because Asajj is early, it's quite feasible to do so. Breaking in is Surprise Strike with 1 less power, but it gets Saboteur. So if your opponent is putting out Sentinels, then you can just bypass them completely. If you use this on Asajj leader, then she will be hitting for 6 with Saboteur. And 6 power, if your opponent has an early to deploy leader, that is going to be enough to probably kill them and take no damage back. So very useful in that sense. Droid deployment, we've got 2 of those, so it doesn't seem terribly exciting because you create 2 battle droid tokens, which might seem a bit pointless when we're trying to be an aggro deck, but it is mainly to have more bodies on the board. So if someone's got Power of the Dark Side, it's either going to put them off of using it or make it much less effective because you'll just pick a battle droid token rather than one of your proper units, so to speak. But its main purpose is for having more exploit fodder around for the Asajj unit. and also it is an event, so you can then do the +1 attack damage to a unit. They're also good to throw into like village protectors if it's still got a shield up. Force choke. So this is a good removal because it does 5 damage. The drawing a card is a little bit annoying because we do have hand attack cards as well, but they kind of help cancel each other out, I guess. But importantly, this can be a 1-cost event because if you control a force unit, it costs 1 less to play. So it's a viable option when you deploy Asajj. This will only cost 1, and then you can still stick a Fallen Lightsaber on her. So you're probably going to take out, if you need to, 2 ground units in that phase. So very useful. Keep fighting, so ready a unit of 3 or less power. Most of the units in this deck have 3 or less power. Our whole Space Force has 3 or less. And the only exceptions are Kylo, who will never benefit, Super Battle Droid, who will never benefit, Asajj, depending on if you've attacked with her already, she can benefit, and then Asajj leader herself, her on attack is for this attack and not this phase, so if you've not upgraded her, you can attack with her twice in a phase as well. So we've got a lot of potential targets for keep fighting, and that will be particularly useful against your kind of hard control decks. If they're using insta-kill cards, then you can get more attacks in a phase when you otherwise would be able to before they reset. No Good to Me Dead, pretty essential for this. Probably the main use for this is to exhaust their leader, especially if you don't have Breaking In or Surprise Strike to be able to one-shot them with Asajj. So yeah, it just takes them out of commission, enabling you to really focus on their base as well. And then Surprise Strike, as I mentioned, +3. So with Asajj leader, hits for 7. It's going to be able to take out most things, going to be able to take out most leaders without them being upgraded. So pretty essential. There's definitely some tweaking that can be done with all of these events. You might find that a different balance works for you. But I think as a core list of events, this is a pretty good balance. Gets you kind of a good mix of offense and defense. Now onto the wildcard section, where I try to highlight cards that are perhaps slept on or not really used, or not used in the context of a deck and leader that we're looking at. And I think that No Bargain has a place in here. So it's a 3-cost event, so each opponent discards a card from their hand and draw a card. So combined with Force Throw, this is another hand attack card, but it also gives you an advantage of drawing a card as well. And because we have a lot of low-cost cards in this deck in general, you are going to often be playing 2 cards in a phase. So you are going to be getting quite low at times. So this just helps to maintain your hand whilst depriving your opponent of options in theirs. So if we're getting to 5 or 6 resources, your opponent may only have 2 cards in hand. You can discard one of theirs, draw one yourself. They may only be able to play 1 card instead of 2, which will help push home your own advantage on the field. In terms of upgrades, we've only got the Fallen Lightsaber. Another good option would be the Hotshot Blaster. I did originally have Hotshot Blaster in there because it's just a very good smuggle option, but I wanted to be able to have the +3 health on Asajj because, as I said, that takes her out of takedown and open fire range because otherwise she's very vulnerable. But the other effect of this is deal 1 damage to each ground unit the defending player controls if it's on a force unit, so Asajj or Asajj unit. This can be more of a bonus effect, and if you've not used Tarkin Town by the time you activate this effect, then you're probably going to have a target or 2 that you can make use of. The on attack is also extremely useful if there's a shielded sentinel, because the 1 damage will take the shield off first, and then you'll do the damage to the sentinel itself and probably end up killing it. So very useful. In terms of other options, I've already mentioned the Hotshot Blaster because you can smuggle it because it's still going to be within the yellow aspect, so there's no penalty. Political Pressure could be an interesting one. It's only a 1 cost. It's another hand attack card, potentially, because your opponent has a choice, they can discard a random card, or if they choose not to, you get 2 battle droid tokens. So again, this helps to give you more bodies on board, more exploit fodder, etc. B1 attack platform, I originally had this in, but I found that I was just resourcing it all the time because of its 2 health. There are so many different things that will be able to take this out without really even needing to try. I think this card is more of a timely intervention card, so that allows you to ambush with a unit, and with 5 power for only 3 cost, I would say that's probably going to be its main use in the game overall, because this thing dies to daring raid, grenade strike, open fire, blood sport. There's a lot of random damage pings going around, so you only need 2 of those to take it out. It will die to most 1-cost units as well. So yeah, I just haven't found a place for it in this deck. Infiltrating Demolisher is another pretty good option, I would say. It's a 4-cost, but it has exploit, and we've got a decent amount of exploit fodder in this deck. 4-5 is actually pretty decent stats for a 4-cost unit that has an exploit tag on it, but significantly it has Saboteur, so this could help you punch through any kind of wall that your opponent is putting up. And with 5 health, it's relatively sturdy as well, so this would definitely be a good option as well, perhaps instead of Kylo, if you want something perhaps a bit more reliable that you're going to get to. On the Doorstep is Unassuming. It's a 4-cost event, 3 battle droid tokens, and ready them. The ready them is the most significant part. So again, I keep referring back to Village Protectors, but it is extremely popular at the moment. Your 3 battle droids will be readied. You can get rid of a shield, and then if you really want to, you can throw the other battle droids into the Village Protectors and finish them off. Another good use for this would be towards the end of the phase, if your opponent has taken the initiative, then you've still got 4 resources available potentially. Do this, and then you've got an extra 3 damage into their base for 3 that they can't do anything about. So it's a bit like Cassian and/or smuggling him in to an extent. You can get a bonus 3 damage out of nowhere into base or whatever. So yeah, I think there's definitely a version of this deck that will have this in and make very good use of it. Bossk, so he has Ambush, which is always good, but when you play an event, you may deal 2 damage to a unit, so we've got tons of events, so you'll get a lot of good use out of Bossk's secondary ability. Zuckuss, I would say if you don't have Kylo Ren, he's a good alternative, primarily because of Saboteur. So 6/6 are very good stats anyway, but combined with the Saboteur, it just gives your opponent a significant threat to try and deal with if primarily their defenses relied on Sentinels. So yeah, he can really help close out the game if needed. And then the Ruthless Raider, 4/6, okay stats, but again, the most significant thing is deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. So this would combine well with the likes of the Vanguard Droid Bomber and Officer, where you're just dealing damage by not really having to do anything. And it also doubles up when defeated. So you can get 4 damage into base by this alone. So this would be another potential alternative to Kylo if you do not have him. So yeah, that is the deck. As I say, it's very oppressive, trying to put pressure on early and getting damage in without even having to do much. The events really help to smash in more damage than you otherwise would be able to, along with enabling Asajj to kind of go on the defensive in a way, but then that allows you to be offensive because they've got no units on the ground to be able to take you out. But yeah, as I said, I think this is probably the favourite deck I've made for set 3 so far, and I was looking at revisiting the Kylo deck I had for set 2, but I think this is probably the better option now. The Kylo deck I used in set 2 had a lot of 1 health units, which is really not going to probably do too well in the game these days. So yeah, let me know what you think, and if there's any other leaders or cards that you want me to look at in particular. I was originally going to do a Nala Say video, but when I played that deck on Tuesday, it fell completely flat on its face. So that will need quite a bit more work before I put it up on here. But yeah, subscribe and like if you don't want to miss out on more videos, and I'll see you in the next one.